English translation 297th contact. Monday, 19th of March, 2001, 15:45 hours.
Greetings, my friend. The fact that you are lying down is not a good sign, and so is your appearance.
Hello, my friend. Nothing is hidden from you.
I feel the need to diagnose what is causing you evil.
Does it have to be?
Certainly.
Then just what kind of device is this?
It is a further development of the device you have known for diagnostics before. Sit still.
And?
Very unpleasant. Have you eaten any contaminated food?
No, I have not. Why?
You suffer from poisoning symptoms that affect your whole brain. But I cannot figure out the cause. Your body is also affected by the same substances. It must be very bad for you, and you must also suffer from dizziness and headaches as well as anxiety.
No, I certainly have not eaten or drunk anything spoiled. By the way, I was quite nauseous when you were last here, but you obviously did not notice it then.
But I have. But I thought you were just a little uncomfortable, so I did not ask you about it. The thing now seems to be quite bad, as the data of my device show. I will take a blood sample from you. Here, give me your middle finger. So that already is it.
Aha, without a needle. Just like Star Trek. So they are on the right track with their fantasies.
When we have finished our conversation and our affairs, I will try to analyze your blood. If time allows, I will tell you the result tomorrow afternoon and also tell you what you can do against your evil.
Thank you very much, Ptaah.
Then I will not bother you for long so that you can rest further. If I had been able to review and evaluate the recordings of your General Assembly over the weekend, I would have noticed your condition by then. As it looks, you had a lot of trouble to get through everything.
You can say that out loud. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday was as bad as today. But I do not want to complain.
Your usual speech. But it would often be better if you would complain instead of dedicating yourself unswervingly to your tasks.
I say, let us not talk about it, because my time does not last forever, and there should or still be a lot of work to be done.
That may be true, but you can only do it if you remain alive in your time.
Please, Ptaah. We have other things to talk about than those things. Here, I have already done the new work for your spiritual leadership.
You like to joke. When I think of your condition,
I am not joking, and besides, I cannot break down because of every little ache. So let us thus leave that. If it suits you, I would like to ask you a few more questions.
you will not let it stop you anyway.
Well then, do you, I mean only you, Ptaah, do you also have pets? I mean those that are kept in human living premises.
No.
I actually already knew that, but I wanted to have it officially recorded in a contact conversation. Then another question. In the parallel dimensions, does time run parallel to our time? I do not mean the time that is determined by the human beings of the different dimensions, but the time that is determined by the universe and the time streams.
The purely universal time is uniform in all dimensions. Differences only appear in dimensions of the past or the future, and only in the form of a time shift to the present time.
Which means that in the past as well as in the future, universal time remains uniform, and only the time shift to the present is of significance.
Right.
Then a further question, which is obviously still unclear with different group members. To my knowledge and understanding, one must consider the terms dimension and space-time structure as a value. So dimension also means space-time structure, and space-time structure also means dimension. Am I right, or have I explained it wrong?
You know that your explanation is of correctness.
I just wanted to confirm it. Then another question. How do you deal with wild animals? Do you care for them in the same manner as the human beings here on Earth? So do you also go hunting? Do you also have hunters for this purpose?
Hunting is not permitted in our country, and we leave the regulation of the population in the animal world to nature and its laws. The open nature with us so big and actually left free enough that all animals have their necessary free space. Consequently, no animals migrate into villages and cities, as is the case on the Earth, because the animals no longer have sufficient living space due to the enormous overpopulation of humans. It is forbidden for us to enter wild areas in order to build recreation or dwellings there. In addition, it is customary in our country, which unfortunately is not yet the case for all federates, that no game and no other animals which are kept in large parks and enclosures and which are used for dairy farming, etc., are killed in order to produce food from them, etc. We produce the necessary animal proteins for our food through special duplicators by producing synthetic meat that is absolutely equivalent to real animal meat. But you know that.
Of course. But also in this respect, I only wanted an answer once, which is written down in a contact conversation. But now I still have a question regarding your explanation regarding arbitrary and arbitrarily. It is your statement of Thursday the 17th of July 1975, at the 31st contact at 10:14 hours. The original pages 295 and 296 NB. See Pleiadian Pleiaren Contact Reports, Volume 1, pages 370, 372, sentences 269, 372. Contain your words on how I had these processed into a brochure under the title Arbitrary and Unarbitrary. I have also written a foreword. If you would like to read through this, please. Here.
Explanation: arbitrary, arbitrarily, unarbitrary, unarbitrarily.
These are well-known terms which are used very often in daily life as well as in the spiritual teaching and in numerous writings of the Figu. But as is constantly shown, these terms are not understood correctly in their actual value and in connection with many things, so a useful explanation is necessary. The terms arbitrary and arbitrarily in the original value actually mean choice of the will, according to the old word values will and free will choice. In this traditional concept, arbitrariness in a positive sense is a mental voluntariness or free will, an inclination or affection, an agreement, a good judgment, or a voluntary resolution, whereby everything always takes place out of free will. If such a thoughtful action is to be done, or a thoughtful word is to be spoken, etc., then a free will and conscious free thinking are required, whereby a conscious and well thought out thing comes about, which can be both negative and positive, depending on the will of the person. If a conscious thinking according to free will is applied, then an arbitrariness or a willfulness therefore takes place. Therefore, conscious thinking according to free will is just as arbitrary as also an action which is preceded by conscious thinking according to free will. So, arbitrary or arbitrarily does not mean anything negative, but something positive. For example, acting according to free will by conscious thinking according to one's own free will. So everything that one does on his or her own initiative must be based on arbitrariness, on the conscious choice of their free will, no matter whether something negative or positive arises from it. Thus, it is not possible for one to do or undertake something he or she wants without having to make an effort to think within the framework of free choice through his or her free will. In the 18th century, a further concept value for arbitrary and arbitrarily was created, namely a completely negative value, which expresses itself in the form of a disregard of the rights and interests as well as the body and the life of other people, but also by ruthlessness, arbitrary measures, arbitrary rule, negatively arbitrary or willfulness, etc., and compulsion as well as autocracy, negative action using one's own power, unrestrained, absolutist arbitrariness and threat, etc. In this sense, the terms arbitrary and arbitrarily or arbitrariness, etc. are of a decidedly negative meaning and value, and consequently there is no connection whatsoever between them and the original positive value. The etymological dictionary of German contains the following with regard to the term arbitrary: behavior and action according to one's own will, arbitrariness, MHD. Wille, willkürend. Wille, Kör, free choice of will, free will, voluntary resolution, inclination. 2. Agreement, arbitrariness, is composed of the word treated under will and med. Kure, MD. Kure, kore. The meaning which has prevailed since the 18th century, aiming at the disregard of the interests of others, is already being introduced in MHD. Use in such cases as the free resolution of one side is regarded by the other as restriction or coercion. Compare MHD. Nicht Sinne finde Willekür. To this arbitrarily adj. Acting at one's own discretion, arbitrary, 18th century. Previously, acting voluntarily, according to free decision, 16th century. Compare MHD. Willekürlich. Unarbitrary means in the conceptual value no choice of free will, as well as a non-thinking and non-thinking of a matter, etc. Unarbitrary, however, also includes a positive value, which is expressed in some form in a not lord over others, and in the non-disregard of others and their non-impairment, as well as in a non-coercive manner, etc. Unarbitrarily includes the value of the unintentional, unconscious, and unintentional, etc. So unarbitrarily is something that is not deliberate and therefore not arbitrary, but that happens entirely by itself, without one wanting it oneself, or without one bringing it about oneself. According to what has been explained, it is therefore absolutely necessary that the terms mentioned are always understood in their correct meaning, because only then is it possible for no misunderstandings to arise. Billy.
Your explanation of the facts which you put before my explanation is absolutely fine. There is nothing wrong with it.
Obviously, everything is not understood nevertheless, which is why I would like to ask you for a further short explanation. Also, Marcel has difficulties with your explanation, which is why I wrote him the following letter, which you should also read through. Here, it is this letter that I have addressed to him in the hope that it will clarify the matter.
Your explanation is good and should be enough. Nevertheless, I want to make an additional statement, which you should, together with your letter and your explanatory foreword in the brochure, precede my words about arbitrary and unarbitrary, at least in the new output form of the contact conversations.
You mean the book form in which we will publish the contact reports from now on?
Right. But now, hear my additional explanation, which you should add to my words of 17th July 1975, together with your explanations and a small foreword. In ancient times, the term arbitrary meant choice of the will, namely, choice of the will in free form. From this it was deduced, and is still deduced today in the aforementioned sense, that something is or can be done according to one's own free choice of will. And only in this form is it possible that anything at all can be done, produced, created, or brought to life. If something is to be done, produced, created, or brought into being, then a free will of choice is necessary, just like arbitrariness. Without a free will after choice, that is to say, without arbitrariness, nothing can be created, produced, created, done, or brought to life. The very conception of a child requires arbitrariness, that is to say, a free will of one's own choice. This is entirely according to the original value of the word, which in no wise has anything to do with the new meaning of how it was coined in Middle High German and in the second half of the 18th century, namely that arbitrariness was equated with the fact that generally valid standards, rights and laws and interests of other humans exercising their power are violently and autocratically, etc., disregarded and trampled underfoot by people exercising their own power, so that selfish, absolutist, boundless, and often malicious action appears. This new word value cannot in any wise be compared with the original word value of the traditional concept of arbitrariness, which states that nothing can happen, be given, begotten, done, created, or brought into being in any wise without the free will of choice or arbitrariness. If nowadays the term arbitrary is generally only seen and understood in a negative sense, then the original value must nevertheless be maintained, according to the explanations of our linguists, who explain that the term arbitrary in its originally purely positive sense and value and in its original form leads back to Celtic times. A fact which is nowise known to earthly linguists, because the possibility of linguistic antiquity research in these dimensions remains closed to them.
Thank you. That should be enough. Although there will be, as always, know-it-alls of their own, your worships, who will do great in language research and deny your explanations. What the hell? Firecrackers from scientists and know-it-alls of pseudo-scientific graces have existed since time immemorial.
With which you speak a word of truth.
Here I have some internet excerpts concerning the moon landing faked by the Americans. If you still want to read them, please. I would like to add them to report number 238 of 18th May 1991, original page number 2034, if possible.
You can do that, but I do not have to read what you mentioned because I know it. I even want to say that I would like you to add the whole thing to the old lines, even if the indicated locations are not entirely devoted to reality. For repetition, I would find it also well if you can attach afterwards also my earlier words about arbitrariness and unarbitrariness to this report.
I will, along with the internet excerpts.
So be it. But now you should rest and recover. Tomorrow I will be here again, probably in the afternoon, if time permits.
I have 2 more questions in private. If you want to answer them?
But after that it will have to be enough.
Thanks. So it is about
Voluntary and Involuntary by Ptaah, the 17th of July, 1975.
As with all things, everything requires a certain amount of preparation. Nothing can be done and fulfilled without appropriate preparation. If, however, this is illogically done anyway, then an involuntary action takes place which can never be of value. An indiscriminate act is tantamount to illogicalness and imprudence. And out of such an unintentional act, therefore, only illogicalness can follow. If, for example, the creation itself would act involuntarily, then there would be no laws and recommendations that would ensure the existence of all forms of life, etc. There would be vain illogicalness, and thus complete disorder. This means that nothing could exist, not even the creation. For arbitrariness means the free choice of will, and thus also the free choice of thinking. An unarbitrary action, however, does not presuppose free will, but an action or a situation or something else which one does not consider, cannot consider, or which one does not want. An unarbitrary action presupposes that no thinking force determines or can determine an action. This means that an action takes place involuntarily, or without consideration and without consistency, which can or must always lead to negative effects and events. Such involuntary actions, however, are only capable by life forms that have not yet recognized the logical logic of their course of events. In other words, this means that such thinking life forms in conscious forms still have very minimal values and have no control over their thought form and power. Thus, they are also able to act unarbitrarily, without prior consideration, without prior corresponding thought work. They have simply not yet learned to really think. If this were also the case with the creation, then nothing would exist, because through illogicalness in this form, everything is destroyed before it is even created. A positive arbitrary act or process means, in contrast to unarbitrary action, real life. This means that an arbitrary action presupposes a rational thought which is able to determine the consistency of an action. This means that the existence of an action is consistently secured. This in turn means that the logical nature of the action is logical. Arbitrariness is logic and thoughtfulness and secures the existence of the action. Thus it is clear from the logic of creation itself that it is therefore arbitrary, deliberate, and acts logically, and thus secures the existence of all life. Only where there is arbitrariness can the consistency of an action be determined, and thus life be generated. Arbitrariness is therefore necessary in all things, including the search for and dissemination of truth and knowledge. In order to make a truth comprehensible, therefore, a path to understanding must first be created through arbitrariness. Here, arbitrariness means the means of communication between ignorance and understanding and between ignorance and knowledge. Through arbitrariness, which in this form embodies the pure process of reflection and thought, the rational mind is stimulated to work and slowly led to knowledge. Once the knowledge has progressed sufficiently, further teaching material can be added, which is then actually processed and exploited further arbitrarily, whereby further knowledge is gained. In a course, therefore, arbitrariness is of great importance, for it is only through it that the logical consistency of the course of the teaching is guaranteed. Never, however, can a teaching be imparted in its deepest knowledge at the beginning of the teaching. Only the necessary preliminary work and introductions follow, in order to gradually penetrate into the center of the teaching and to impart the actual knowledge. This process cannot be reversed because this would mean an involuntary act whose consistency in the course of action would lead to catastrophe. Take the example of one of the vocational teachings, as they are customary on Earth. If a person of your Earth wants to become a physicist, then he or she cannot immediately deal with the deepest secrets and the deepest knowledge of this profession and immediately learn everything. First, they must laboriously enter into the preliminary work and slowly learn everything from scratch. Once this has been accomplished, and a certain amount of knowledge has been acquired, only then can they deal with more profound things and slowly penetrate into the knowledge center of the profession. The same applies to the spiritual teaching. Therefore, my daughter has not yet reached into the deeper things of spiritual teaching and explanations, because first the seed had to be thrown out. This in turn first had to adapt to the soil insofar as it fell on fertile ground. Then everything had to enrich itself with invigorating powers in order to be able to germinate. That means that the teachings and explanations, etc., that Sim-Ya say had brought up to that point were and are the foundation stone for the main work that actually only now follows. What has been transmitted so far is, in truth, only the preliminary work through which the Earth humans have to be prepared for the core of truth. So this is an introduction and preparation to understand and grasp the following teaching and explanations. So if Simyase has so far only spoken in negative form about the earthly religions, then this has its justification in the fact that thereby the earthly human had to be made aware of the falseness and unreality of their religions, because these are malicious and unreal in every form, as this is not the case elsewhere in these forms on the worlds known to us in this universe. When we speak of earthly religions, then, they are meant in their negative forms, as they exist on earth and find their applications and effects. Religions in this sense are a deadly danger not only on earth or for the human beings of earth, but they also harbor deadly dangers for other worlds in this universe. Religions, in the sense in which they exist on the earth, are indeed unique in the realm of the universe as we know it, and we find no equal in any realm. As a deadly danger, false religions dominate Earth humans and thus the whole planet, and have been stunting your world in terms of consciousness for thousands of years. All progress in consciousness is blocked by these religions and cannot progress. The evolution of consciousness, and thus also the evolution of the spirit of Earth humans, is hindered by the false teachings of the religions.